3 hours earlier, Zoe had clocked in for what she thought would be just another shift, serving Orlando's elite. The Venetian's private casino floor was buzzing with unusual energy. Security was tripled, and whispers about the announcement filled every corner. She tied her black uniform apron tighter around her waist, smoothing down the simple dress that marked her as staff among the designer gowns and tailored suits. "Keep your head down tonight, Zoe," her supervisor Marcus warned. "The Donovan family is hosting something big. No mistakes." She nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Everyone in Orlando knew the Donovan name, whispered in equal parts fear and respect. Carter Donovan had inherited his father's empire at 25 and expanded it beyond anyone's imagination. Hotels, restaurants, construction, all legitimate fronts for the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. As she moved through the crowd with her first tray of champagne, Zoe caught glimpses of the evening's main attraction. Carter stood near the poker tables, commanding attention without trying. At 32, he was devastatingly handsome, in a way that made grown men nervous and women forget how to breathe. His black hair was perfectly styled, his tailored suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months, and when he smiled, which was rare, it never quite reached his storm-grey eyes. Flanking him like perfectly matched bookends were the evening's real story, Isabella Rossetti and Victoria Ashford, the two heiresses everyone said he was choosing between. Isabella, with her raven hair and emerald dress, represented old money. Her family's shipping empire traced back 4 generations. Victoria, blonde and ethereal in ice-blue silk, brought new money, tech billions that made even Carter's wealth seem modest. "They say he's announcing his engagement tonight," whispered Mrs. Henderson, an older socialite, as Zoe refilled her champagne. "Smart business move. Either choice strengthens his position tremendously." Zoe tried to tune out the gossip, but it was impossible. Isabella laughed like wind chimes at something Carter said, while Victoria placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. Both women were gorgeous, accomplished, and born into the kind of life Zoe could only serve from the sidelines. She thought about her own reality as she worked, the tiny apartment she shared with her sick grandmother, the 3 jobs that barely covered medical bills, the acceptance letter to nursing school she couldn't afford to accept. Carter Donovan existed in a world where people like her were invisible. That's why what happened next made no sense. She was serving champagne near the high-stakes poker area when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Well, well, if it isn't little Zoe Martinez, Tommy Marconi, her ex-boyfriend's cousin and the reason she'd had to change apartments twice in the past year. He'd been trying to collect a debt her ex had left behind, money borrowed from dangerous people for gambling that went wrong. "I don't have anything to do with Danny anymore," she whispered, trying to keep serving as if nothing was happening. "That's not how it works, sweetheart. Family debts don't disappear." Tommy's hand closed around her wrist, just tight enough to hurt. 15,000 plus interest, you've got 1 week. The tray shook in her hands. 15,000 might as well have been 15 million. "Please, Problem here." The voice was quiet, controlled, but it made Tommy's face go white. Carter Donovan stood behind them, and though his tone was calm, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Donovan, sir. Just a misunderstanding." Tommy released Zoe's wrist immediately. Carter's eyes moved from Tommy to Zoe, taking in her pale face and trembling hands. When his gaze returned to Tommy, it was arctic. "I don't like misunderstandings in my establishments. Marcus." Her supervisor appeared as if summoned by magic. "Yes, sir? Escort Mr. Marconi out. Permanently." "Wait," Tommy started, but one look at Carter's face stopped him. Security appeared from nowhere, and within seconds, Tommy was gone. Zoe stood frozen, aware that half the casino was watching this unexpected drama. Carter studied her for a long moment, and she prepared for dismissal, or worse. Instead, he did something that would change everything. "Your name?" "Zoe Martinez, sir." "Take a break, Zoe Martinez, 10 minutes. It wasn't a suggestion. As she hurried toward the staff area, she caught Isabella's sharp glare and Victoria's calculating look. Whatever had just happened, it had shifted something in the evening's dynamics, but she had no idea how much. Zoe spent her 10-minute break in the staff bathroom, trying to stop her hands from shaking. When she returned to the floor, the energy had shifted dramatically. Carter was speaking quietly with several men in expensive suits. His inner circle, she realized. Isabella and Victoria stood nearby, their practiced smiles looking slightly strained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter's voice carried across the room an hour later, "thank you for joining me tonight." The crowd gathered around the central raised area where he stood. Zoe positioned herself against the far wall, trying to remain invisible while still being available if anyone needed service. "Many of you know why you're here," Carter continued, his presence commanding absolute attention. "Business partnerships, family alliances, these things matter in our world." Isabella straightened, her smile luminous. Victoria smoothed her already perfect hair. Both women looked like they were preparing for their moment of triumph. However, Carter's voice took on a different tone. "I've realized something tonight. The most important partnerships aren't always the most obvious ones." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Isabella's smile faltered slightly. "Sometimes," Carter's eyes swept the room, "true value isn't measured in bank accounts or family names. Sometimes it's found in character, in dignity under pressure, in the strength to face adversity without losing your humanity." Zoe felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if the universe was shifting around her. "Which is why," Carter's gaze found hers across the crowded room, "I'm choosing neither of the lovely women my advisors selected for me." The silence was deafening. Isabella's face went white. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Instead, Carter stepped down from the platform and began walking directly toward Zoe. "I'm choosing the woman who caught my attention by being exactly who she is, without pretense or calculation." Zoe's world tilted sideways. People were turning to see where he was going. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Carter stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, see the small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him even more attractive. "You don't know me," he said quietly. His voice meant only for her, despite the fact that everyone was straining to hear. "But I've been watching you work tonight. The way you handled that situation with grace, the way you treat everyone with equal respect regardless of their station. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." I don't understand," she whispered. His smile was small but genuine, the first real one she'd seen from him all evening. "I'm offering you a choice, Zoe Martinez, a partnership that could change your life and help both of us." "Mr. Donovan," Isabella's voice cut across the room like a blade, "surely you're not serious. This is a serving girl." Carter didn't turn around, but his jaw tightened. "This is a woman with more integrity in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies." Victoria stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Carter, think about what you're doing. Our families, the business implications." Now he did turn, and the look he gave both women was polite but final. "I've thought about nothing else for months, and I've realized that a marriage built on business calculations is no marriage at all." He turned back to Zoe, extending his hand. "What do you say? Will you let me take you away from all this? Let me show you a different world?" Zoe stared at his outstretched hand, acutely aware that her entire life hung in the balance. Behind him, she could see the faces of Orlando's elite, some shocked, some disgusted, some fascinated by the drama unfolding. "I don't have anything to offer you," she whispered. "You have everything I want," he replied softly. "Honesty, strength, a heart that hasn't been corrupted by money or power." She thought about her grandmother's medical bills, about the nursing school acceptance letter she couldn't afford to pursue, about Tommy Marconi and the debt that wasn't even hers. Then she thought about the way Carter had stepped in without being asked, had seen her humanity when everyone else saw only a uniform. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The casino erupted in whispers, gasps, and barely contained drama, but Zoe heard none of it, because Carter Donovan was looking at her like she was the most valuable thing in the room. And maybe, for the first time in her life, she felt like she might be. The next morning, Zoe woke up in a world that felt like someone else's dream. Carter's penthouse suite overlooked all of Orlando, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a city that looked entirely different from 30 floors up. She'd slept in a guest room larger than her entire apartment, in a bed that probably cost more than her car. A soft knock interrupted her overwhelmed observations. "Miss Martinez," a woman's voice professionally warm. "Mr. Donovan asked me to ensure you have everything you need. I'm Sarah, the house manager." Zoe opened the door to find an elegant woman in her 50s, holding a garment bag. and wearing the kind of efficient smile that managed to be both friendly and respectful. "He's in meetings until noon," Sarah continued, "but wanted to make sure you're comfortable. These are for you." She indicated the garment bag and several shopping bags. He estimated sizes, but if anything doesn't fit, just let me know. Inside the bags were clothes more beautiful than anything Zoe had ever owned. Soft cashmere sweaters, perfectly fitted jeans, a dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything in her size, everything elegant but not flashy. "He chose these himself?" she asked, fingering the butter-soft material of a camel-colored coat. Sarah's smile became more genuine. "Mr. Donovan is very observant. He said you had classic taste and preferred quality over flash." She paused. "He also said to tell you that your grandmother's medical bills have been handled, and that he's arranged for the best cardiac specialist in Florida to consult on her case." Zoe sat down hard on the bed. "He what?" "He mentioned you might be surprised. He wanted to take care of the immediate concerns, so you could focus on other things." Before Zoe could process this fully, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Good morning, I hope you slept well. Join me for lunch?" See. She stared at the message, reality crashing back. She was in Carter Donovan's penthouse because she'd agreed to... What exactly? A partnership, he'd said. But what did that mean? When she met him for lunch at an exclusive restaurant that he apparently owned, Carter looked different in daylight. Less intimidating, more human. He wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans, but somehow still managed to look like he owned everything around him. "You have questions," he said after they'd ordered, his perceptiveness unnerving. "A few thousand," she admitted. His laugh was genuine, transforming his entire face. "Start with the biggest one. Why me? And don't say it's because I have integrity. Half of Orlando has integrity. You chose me over women who could give you everything." Carter leaned back, studying her. "Do you know what my life has been like for the past 10 years? Every conversation calculated, every relationship analyzed for what it could bring to the business. Every woman I've dated has either wanted my money or been terrified of my reputation." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But last night, when you were being threatened, you didn't cry. You didn't beg. You stood there with dignity, even though you were scared. And when I intervened, you didn't immediately try to use it to your advantage. You just thanked me and went back to work. That's called being professional. That's called being real. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Their food arrived, but neither of them touched it immediately. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked quietly. "Marriage," he said simply, causing her to choke on her water. "A real partnership. I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who isn't connected to any of the families or business interests that constantly want something from me. You need stability, security, and the chance to build the life you want." That's insane. Is it? We both get what we need. I get honesty and loyalty. You get freedom from financial worry and the chance to pursue nursing school, which, by the way, I've already arranged. You can't just arrange my life. I'm not arranging it. I'm offering to support it. His voice was patient but firm. "You can say no, Zoe. You can walk out right now. Keep the clothes, and I'll still make sure your grandmother gets the best care available. No strings attached." She stared at him, searching for the catch. "And if I say yes, then we figure it out together. I'm not asking you to love me, not yet. I'm asking you to give us a chance to build something real. What about Isabella and Victoria? What about the business implications you mentioned?" Carter's expression darkened slightly. "That's my problem to handle. The families won't be happy, but they'll adapt. Business will continue. And if they don't adapt, they will." The steel in his voice reminded her exactly who she was talking to. "I didn't build this empire by backing down from difficult decisions." Zoe pushed her salad around her plate, mind racing. "This is crazy." "Most good things are." She looked up at him, this dangerous, powerful man who was offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of. "Why do I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff?" "Because you are," he said softly. "We both are. But maybe that's exactly what we need." Before she could change her mind, Zoe nodded. "Okay, but I have conditions." Carter's smile was slow and devastating. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Tell me." 2 weeks later, Zoe was beginning to understand that agreeing to marry Carter Donovan meant entering a world where nothing was simple, including the growing feelings she was developing for her soon-to-be husband. They'd fallen into a routine that surprised her with its normalcy. Mornings together over coffee and the news, afternoons when she attended nursing classes, which he'd arranged at Orlando's top program, evenings when he helped her study, or they watched movies like any normal couple. But normal couples didn't have bodyguards, and normal couples didn't receive threatening messages from spurned heiresses and their angry families. "We need to talk," Carter said one evening, his face serious as he entered the penthouse. She was curled up on the sofa with textbooks, preparing for her first major exam. "That's never good," she said, setting down her highlighter. He sat beside her, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. "The Rossetti and Ashford families are unhappy about our engagement." "Unhappy how?" "Isabella's father has pulled out of 3 major business deals. Victoria's family is threatening to align with my competitors." He ran a hand through his hair. "There's also been talk of more direct action." Zoe felt cold suddenly. "Direct action?" "Nothing will happen to you," Carter said immediately, moving closer. "I've tripled security, but I need you to understand, this isn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This is about power and money, and some people will do anything to protect both. Maybe we should call this off," she whispered. "I never wanted to cause problems for your business." "No." The word was sharp, final. "Don't even think about it." "Carter." "Zoe, look at me." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "In 2 weeks, you've become the best part of my day. You've made me remember what it feels like to want to come home, to have someone to talk to who isn't calculating every word for advantage." Her heart stuttered at the raw honesty in his voice. "You've made me feel human again," he continued softly. "I'm not giving that up because some entitled families are throwing tantrums." "But what if—" He silenced her with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "What if we build something beautiful together?" he whispered against her lips. "What if we prove that the best partnerships aren't made in boardrooms but in moments like this?" Before she could respond, his phone rang, a harsh intrusion into their intimate moment. Carter glanced at the screen and his face went granite hard. "I have to take this," he said, moving to the windows. "Marcus, what happened?" Zoe couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Carter's body language shift into something dangerous. "When?" Pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Get her to the safe house. Now." He hung up and turned to her, his face a mask she'd never seen before. "We need to leave right now." "Carter, what?" "There was an attempt to break into your grandmother's assisted living facility. 3 men, asking questions about you." He was already moving, pulling her up from the couch. "Sarah," he called, and the house manager appeared instantly. "Initiate lockdown protocol." Zoe's world spun sideways. "Is Grandma okay?" "She's safe. My people got to her first." He was leading her toward the private elevator, his hand on the small of her back, protective and warm. "But this changes everything. We're moving up the timeline." "What timeline?" The elevator opened directly into an underground garage where a black SUV waited, engine running. Carter helped her in, then slid in beside her. "The wedding," he said, as the SUV pulled out. "We're getting married tonight." "Tonight?" "Once you're legally my wife, hurting you becomes an act of war against me personally. Right now, you're just the woman I'm dating. After tonight, you'll be under the protection of every alliance I've built." "That's the only reason." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Carter turned to her, his expression intense. "No, Zoe, that's not the only reason." "Then what?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "And I'm tired of pretending this is just a business arrangement." The SUV turned onto the interstate as Zoe's heart stopped completely. "What?" "You heard me." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. But somewhere between watching you study with your tongue sticking out in concentration and seeing you cry happy tears when your grandmother's doctor said the treatment was working, I realized this stopped being fake for me." She stared at him, this powerful, dangerous man who was looking at her like she held his entire world in her hands. "So?" he asked softly. "Will you marry me tonight? For real this time?" Outside the SUV windows, Orlando's lights blurred past as they headed toward whatever came next. And for the first time since this crazy journey began, Zoe knew exactly what her answer would be. The chapel was small, elegant, and completely private. Carter had called in favors to arrange everything in 4 hours. As Zoe stood in the tiny bridal suite, adjusting the simple white dress Sarah had somehow procured. She wondered if this was how every bride felt on her wedding day. Terrified, exhilarated, and absolutely certain she was about to make the most important decision of her life. "You're glowing," said her grandmother, who'd insisted on coming despite the security concerns. Elena Martinez sat in her wheelchair, having been escorted by two of Carter's most trusted men, but her eyes were bright with joy. "I'm terrified, Abuela." "Good. That means it matters." Elena reached for Zoe's hands. "I've seen the way he looks at you, mija, like your sunshine after a long storm. It's happening so fast. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind hasn't figured out yet." Elena smiled. "Your grandfather proposed after knowing me for 6 weeks. We were married for 43 years. A soft knock interrupted them. "Miss Martinez, Mr. Donovan is ready whenever you are." Zoe took a deep breath, kissed her grandmother's cheek, and stepped into the chapel. Carter stood at the altar in a midnight blue suit that made his grey eyes look like storm clouds. When he saw her, his expression shifted into something so tender it made her chest tight. Behind him stood Marcus and 2 other men she recognized as his inner circle. Her side had only her grandmother and Sarah, but somehow that felt perfect, intimate rather than empty. The ceremony was simple, traditional, and surprisingly emotional. When Carter promised to protect and cherish her, his voice was rough with feeling. When she promised to stand by him through whatever came, she meant every word. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said, and Carter's smile was soft and private as he cupped her face. "Hello, Mrs. Donovan," he whispered against her lips. "Hello, husband." The kiss was sweet, full of promise, and interrupted by the sharp buzz of Carter's phone. He ignored it until it buzzed again, then again. "Answer it," Zoe said softly. "It's okay." Carter's face went hard as he listened. "How many?" Pause. "No. Stick to the plan. I'll handle it." He hung up and turned to Zoe. "We need to go." "What's happening?" "Isabella's father just showed up at the hotel where he thought we'd be having the reception, with 12 men and some very specific threats about what happens to people who disrespect his family." Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, the backup plan?" "Initiate it. All of it." Carter turned to Elena. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm sending you somewhere safe for a few days. It's not a request. I understand, mijo. Take care of my granddaughter." "With my life," Carter said simply. As they were escorted to separate vehicles, Zoe realized that her wedding night wasn't going to be spent in a honeymoon suite. It was going to be spent proving that Carter Donovan hadn't built his reputation on empty threats. The safe house was a stunning villa outside the city, surrounded by security that was invisible but omnipresent. Inside, it felt more like a luxury vacation rental than a hiding place. "How long do we stay here?" Zoe asked as Carter poured them both a glass of wine. "As long as it takes for certain families to understand that threatening my wife was a mistake they'll regret for the rest of their significantly shortened lives." "Carter, I know you don't like the violence, Zoe. I know this world is ugly and complicated." He sat beside her on the sofa, wine forgotten. "But these people tried to hurt your grandmother. They threatened you. There are lines that cannot be crossed. And then what? This just goes on forever? Always looking over our shoulders?" "No," he said firmly. "It stops when they realize that the cost of opposing me is higher than the cost of accepting our marriage, which will happen very soon." His phone buzzed with a text. Carter read it, and his smile was sharp and satisfied. "What?" "Isabella's father just discovered that 3 of his key shipping routes have been redirected to my competitors. Victoria's family just lost a major government contract they thought was guaranteed." He set the phone aside and turned to her. "I don't start fights, Zoe, but I always finish them." She studied his face. This man she'd just married, trying to reconcile the gentle husband who helped her study with the ruthless businessman who could destroy families with a phone call. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Marrying me? Entering this world?" Zoe considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she was a struggling waitress with no prospects and insurmountable debt. Tonight, she was married to one of the most powerful men in Florida, with security she'd never known and opportunities she'd never dreamed of. But more than that, she was married to a man who had seen her, really seen her, when everyone else looked through her. A man who was falling in love with her, and who she was falling in love with too. "Ask me tomorrow," she said finally. "After I've been Mrs. Donovan for a full day." Carter's laugh was warm and genuine. "Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I don't regret anything. Best decision I ever made, choosing the girl with nothing to offer. I had more to offer than I realized, she said softly. So did I, he replied, pulling her close. So did I. Outside the villa, Orlando's lights twinkled in the distance. Inside, Carter and Zoe Donovan began their first night as husband and wife, building something beautiful from the chaos that had brought them together. And if there were still threats to handle and families to convince, well, they'd face those together too. 6 months later, Zoe stood in the nursery of their new home, a sprawling estate that somehow managed to feel like a family residence rather than a fortress, arranging flowers from their garden. Through the window she could see Carter in the backyard, teaching her grandmother's physical therapist how to properly secure the new wheelchair ramp he'd had installed. The threats had ended 3 days after their wedding, when Isabella's father had quietly accepted a very generous settlement, and Victoria's family had suddenly decided that overseas business opportunities were more appealing than Orlando politics. Carter had never told her exactly what had been said in those final conversations, and she'd learned not to ask about the parts of his business that were better left in shadow. What mattered was that they were building a life together, real, messy, beautiful, and completely unexpected. Her nursing program was going better than she'd ever dreamed. Carter had endowed a scholarship in her name for single mothers pursuing healthcare careers. Her grandmother was thriving in the guest house they'd built specifically for her, close enough for daily visits, but independent enough to maintain her dignity. Mrs. Donovan? Sarah appeared in the doorway, smiling. Your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Zoe smoothed her dress, a simple blue wrap that Carter said made her eyes look like sapphires, and headed downstairs. The appointment was with a young single mother applying for the scholarship, a girl who reminded Zoe so much of her former self that it was almost painful. As she conducted the interview, Zoe thought about how much had changed. Not just her circumstances, but her understanding of what was possible when someone saw your true value and decided to invest in it. Later that evening, as she and Carter sat on their terrace watching the sunset, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "What's this?" she asked, though her heart was already racing. "Our 6-month anniversary present. Open it." Inside was a simple, elegant ring, not a replacement for her wedding band, but a companion to it. Engraved inside were the words, "You had everything I wanted." "Carter, I know we did everything backward," he said, taking her hand. "Marriage first, falling in love after, building a life while we figured out who we were together. But I want you to know, if I could go back to that casino and choose all over again, knowing everything I know now, I'd still walk across that room and choose you, even knowing how complicated it would get, especially knowing how beautiful it would become." He slipped the ring onto her finger, next to her wedding band. "You took a man who had everything money could buy and taught him what wealth actually looks like, which is coming home to someone who chooses you every day, not because of what you can provide, but because of who you are when everything else is stripped away." As the Florida sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Zoe reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd been right that night in the casino. She'd had nothing to offer by traditional standards. But sometimes nothing was everything, and sometimes the girl with the least to give had exactly what a powerful man needed to remember his own humanity. "I love you, Carter Donovan," she said softly, "and I love you, Zoe Donovan. My best decision, my greatest treasure, my perfectly imperfect wife." In the distance, Orlando's lights began to twinkle to life, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy being grateful for the moment when two unlikely hearts had recognized each other across a crowded room and decided to build something lasting from pure, honest love.